All right, what you're looking at is a picture of Joe Thomas Turon, and he worked next to me in RCA. And this is a picture of him a few years ago, just before he died. And there were a lot of people you'd say were characters in RCA. Now, if you look, I'll see if in the picture if it's there. Yeah, this is a stovepipe. He had this is there's a stove somewhere back in there. He got mad at the town, so he went back to heating his house with wood. He was a real character, smart guy, very frugal with his money, and he taught me a lot of things, to look at things a lot different. Okay, first of all, he was from Pennsylvania. He would refer to his mother as Ma, and his father as Dad or whatever. And he had a fairly big family, and he moved to Colonia, New Jersey, and his brother was in a town nearby. And one of the unique things that him and his brother figured out how to do was to circumvent the wives. Oh, this might be Patty, his daughter. I haven't seen Patty since she was little, so I'm not sure. But anyway, his brother lived nearby, and whenever they want to buy something for themselves, the wives would say no. So what they did, they learned ahead of time. Joe would tell his brother to what he wanted, and the brother would buy it. And then his brother would say, I want this, and then he'd go buy it. And the wives were like, their hands were tied. They couldn't do anything. But he had a saying whenever I said I bought something, and I'm sitting at RCA, and he'd go, store-bought, store-bought, because he canned. He canned every year. He canned from his garden, okay? And I gave him grapes. He had grapes. He made his own wine. And I told him my dad had planted some grapes in the wrong spot. And he asked if he could have them. He drove all the way over to my house after work and dug those grapes out. And my mother was like, what's he doing? He says, that's the way he is. And she says he could, but he was the fact that he in his mind, he couldn't accept the fact that somebody was just going to dig those grapes up and throw them away. Okay, so he took the grape plants. When he got them home, his dog got a hold of one of them and chewed it up on him. But anyway, that's how he was. Now, he drove a van on certain days. Other days, he'd come in by train. And you were never to call that van a truck. And I used to call him Joe. His middle name was Thomas. I used to call him Joe Truck Turon. And he'd say, someday you're going to need that van. And that's all he would say. And then someone told me the story. This one guy kept needling him, kept calling it a truck, kept calling it a truck. And then when you open the door to the van, down on the little metal strip, it said truck, Ford truck. And the guy would say that, so Joe, what does it say down by the door when you open it up? And he would needle this guy, needle him, needle. He'd keep needling Joe. Well, one day he needed to take a TV home from RCA because they didn't deliver from the company store. So he made him write up an apology letter saying that it wasn't a truck. It was a multi-use, it wasn't an SUV, it was a multi-use truck, multi-use vehicle, something like that. He had a long sentence what that thing was, but it wasn't a truck, you know. But here's one of those stories that I can't tell here. Now, he built things out of nothing, this guy. You're looking at him. That's the actual picture of Joe Turon before he passed on. He took a Volkswagen transmission, shift transmission, and he turned it into a rotor tiller for his garden. And it had, what, 3 forward speeds, 1 reverse, something like that on a Volkswagen shifter. And he had a big face on it, and he welded all different things to it. He bought himself an electric welder. And around that time, when he was building that at work, he built this hanger that hanged on his belt. And he would go down to the machine shop and cut off, say, a 2-foot piece of angle iron, maybe 2.5. I don't know how long his leg was, his inseam. Yeah, this is a crazy story. But you're looking at him. This is what this guy would do. So I'm looking at him at work. We're getting ready to go home. And for a few weeks ahead of time, he's been walking with a stiff leg. And I'm like, what the hell? He goes, oh, my leg's been bothering me. My leg's been bothering me. So I happened to double back one day to get something at my bench. And there I saw him. He built a hanger out of a coat hanger. And it hung on his belt inside his pants. And he would drill a hole in the piece of angle iron, put it down his leg, and hook it. And he'd go right out past the guard with the stiff leg, all right? So this would go on, I don't know how many weeks he was getting. And he was getting the angle iron to build that tiller. So I went along with it. So one day he come up to me and he says, can you help me? I said, yeah, yeah. He was always helping everybody else, this guy. And I said, what's going on? He goes, no one will help me. I said, what's wrong? He says, I was down in the yard. We had another name for it. The outside of the buildings, there was like a grass patch between the buildings. The buildings went around in a circle type of thing. And he called it the yard. There was actually another name for it. He says, they told me there's a sign there, angle iron free, you could take all you want. So he says, I'm bringing the van up and I'm going to need some help. I said, sure. So after work, and we go out there, I have to wait for him to go get the van all the way down. It's like 3 blocks away from our parking lot. He comes back, he backs in, and I'm loading up. I'm helping him up because I really appreciate you helping me. I'm like, all the people he helped over the years, they didn't help him back, and I helped him. That's the way I feel a lot of times. You help people a lot, and you need a crappy little favor like loading some angle iron, which isn't that heavy, into the van. Well, he loaded that van up. I don't know how he made it home, but he was laughing the next day. He goes, I think I took too much. I'm like, well, you never can take too much. But that was some of the stuff. But, oh, he had this other thing where he would find pieces of metal from different things in RCA, and he would have them across his bench, the top of his bench. And one day I said, what are those things? He says, well, we have bins of these things throughout the company, and they don't know what to do with them. But he says, look, and he takes them down, and he hits them, and they ring. They're tempered steel, and they're shiny. Maybe they were some type of stainless. But in other words, he realized that when you hit them, they'd ring. And when he was like sitting there relaxing, smoking his pipe, he would bring one of these down and like hit it next to his ear. And then I found a few things in the place that resonated, and I brought it to him. But he taught me to look at something that they're throwing out and say, what could I make out of that? All right, what could I make out of that? What could that be other than what it is? Like the Volkswagen's transmission, stick shift. He turned it into a tiller. And he had like a lawnmower gas, I guess. And I'm going to get into another story after this. He took a gas mower apart, lawnmower, and used that motor to run the tiller. And it fit. It just fit. And he got a coupling, the whole thing. The other thing too is he made a compressor, air compressor, out of you take the spark plug out. You take the spark plug out of a lawnmower motor, and you have to do something to the intake or whatever. He turned it into a compressor. Okay. So when I went over to visit him after RCA, I got laid off. He lived near one of my relatives down in Colonia, New Jersey. They lived in Avenel, and it was only a few blocks away. And I'd walk over and visit him, and he'd show me all the things he built. And after RCA, he went in a company that did modems. And his wife was asking me how much I made. And I told him, because he wanted to be sure he was getting the right amount of money. But some of the things I told you once before, we had extension cords for the girls' tube caddy, or tube unit. They wheeled it around. It was a tube tester thing. And it had meters on it, and it used voltages. And the extension cord had 3 wires. It wasn't a regular extension cord. It had ground, it had 110, and it had 300 volts. And he wired up one of these extension cords for Julie or Stacy. And when they plugged it in, it blew the whole place out for 2 days or whatever it was. And he told me that was his biggest screw up. And then he also told me when I was first working there, I was having weird dreams. He says when he first got the job in RCA, he had no electronic knowledge at all. So he was reading these books at night, and they were helping him during the day. And he said he had a dream. He was on a cathode throwing electrons at the plate of a tube. That's what he said. But he was a character, man. And one of the things he would do is he would smoke cigars, pipe and cigar at 2 o'clock in the afternoon break. And it would kill me, okay, because I'm allergic to smoke. My mother was a heavy smoker. And I would work deals with him sometimes. Like I'd give him, people would give me cigars if they had a baby boy or whatever. I'd give him the cigar, but he only smoked at certain times of the month when we had the windows open. He would compromise. But one of the things he would always do was, I'd be sitting there and I had a drawer that would come out between us, and I had my feet there, and he'd real quick cut my shoelaces with a pair of diagonal cutters, and then I end up using wire for my boots. I had like these boots on. They were Caterpillar boots, just if you want to understand what type of boots I was wearing. And I wore them because they were steel toe. You're supposed to have steel toe when you're working around anything that might drop on your foot that's heavy. So I had a pair of Caterpillars. So when you cut those laces, they're a pain in the ass to relace. And then I bought a few pairs, and he kept doing it, so I kept using wire off the racks. And what was the other? Oh, meter leads. We had Simpson 260s. I would come back from break, and they'd be cut up. He cut my positive and my minus. So I would wait till he had got a call down the back, an emergency call for one of the girls. And as he went by me, I'd cut his 2 leads with the diagonal cutters. And he's like, "Oh, did you have to do it now?" I said, "Hey, you got me all the time." But he was a character. Now you just picture him a little younger looking than that. That's how I look now. That's what I look like. Okay, I'm bearded. I don't cut my hair, but Joe has so many quirky things, like making the guys write an apology letter about calling the van a truck. But one of the funny stories is they tell I think Turon's maybe Polish, and anyway, he put garlic powder on everything. And one time, this girl Julie, she wasn't that well upstairs. That's why she was on the floor, on our floor, and Joe was putting too much garlic powder on his food, and Julie smelt it. She went running, and the fire department came for a gas leak. Okay, he would just shake his head and tell the story once in a while. He goes, "Yeah, the fire department came for a gas leak." And I said, "What was it?" He says, "My garlic powder." I go, "Oh, you got to be kidding." He goes, "No." And then he says, "Julie," I said, "Say no more. I get the whole thing. She smelt the garlic powder, thought it was gas, and they called the fire department." And the fire department really thought it was funny because it's RCA. You know, everybody that worked in the fire department and the police department, they had people, their relatives, their moms, dads, all worked in the RCA place. You know, but he was incredibly generous. The one guy in the department was a heavy smoker, and he coughed one day and he threw his back out. So for 3 weeks, Joe went over to his house and like did oil change for his car and helped out around the house. And then every time I was working there, Nick was still a heavy smoker, and he used to squat down whenever he coughed, which he coughed all the time because he was starting to get emphysema. But it was just hilarious stuff working with Joe. And he, like I said, he would just out of the blue, you would be talking about something and store bought, like that. He just go nuts. And then he's always telling you what he's canning, the tomatoes, what week it was. Well, I'm doing tomatoes this week, and it passed the seasons, you know. But he had some real weird things that he did, and I don't think he ever went to the company store. I don't think he ever bought anything. He used to go down and look, because you're allowed to do that. So he'd use his time to go down there and kibitz with people, and he'd go down and look around at the company store. But his thing was going around through the yard and looking what they're throwing out. And then you go up to the guard, and certain things you could have, and then certain things you couldn't have. Like they took all the typewriters out in the yard and they smashed them up. And one of them was the same as my sister's. So I took the motor out, but the sledgehammer had caught the motor, and I couldn't. It was no better than the motor I was taking out. And but he was some son of a gun, man. I just want to tell you, because I mentioned him with the transformers. The boss kept coming up to him and saying, "Joe, you got to get this test done." And the test was for these giant rectifier tubes for submarines. And I went to the other building, and I had to fix. They didn't understand the inrush. The tube took 5 amps DC to light the filament under DC, and then so many amps under AC. Well, in the other building, the guys put an HP supply on it that was 10 amps or whatever, and they blew the fuses out. Then they changed the fuses and they blew the power supplies out. And they were real high-end HP supplies. So I went over there, and it turned out to be the inrush current of the tube until the filament heated was more than 10 amps. Okay, it was 5 amps once it heated. Well, transformer can give you a little bit more, but an HP supply, it pops the fuse. But if you change the fuse to a bigger, you pop the power supply. So I had to go over there. So I get them all set up to do their tests, and then I come back, and the boss is in his ear every day for a while. And I said, "Joe, what the hell's going on? Let me just check this. This is still running. It's still running. What's going on?" He goes, "I gotta add a bunch of power transformers down the back to run these tubes." And I said, "That's what I've been working on in the other building for DC." He says, "Yeah, now they want to run the tubes on AC, the filament. And we have to run so many of them for so many hours." And He goes, I tried it once before. The transformers kept getting red hot. I said, yeah, you got to phase them a certain way. And he's just looking at me. He's keeping quiet. And I said, I'll go down there and help you. So I get the scope out. I think I'm going to have to do Lissajou patterns between transformers. And there's a couple other ways you can do it. So we go wheeling the thing down there. And I'm like in my mind like, gee, I hope I can set up a Lissajou pattern with the transformers. It's been a while since I did it in tech school. So we get down there. And he starts pulling the racks up, and they're large Bakelite slabs with transformers mounted to them. And they're underneath, and the sockets are up on top. So I look at it, I'm like, I said, there's phasing dots on the transformer. And he goes, yeah, but they don't work. I said, well, maybe you got two different brands of transformer. So I'm looking, and I said, well, this whole rack here is the same manufacturer. So I look, and all the phasing of the output for just say it was 6 volts. So they're all in parallel on the one side. So I flip it over and I said, yeah, this side has to be done. He goes, what? I said, the phasing on this side of the transformer has to be phased. He goes, oh no. He goes, he didn't know that. He only knew that the output of the transformers, when they're hooked together, have to be phased. I said, yeah, the ACs of each transformer, when you hook them in parallel, have to be phased also. And then he knew it. So what we did was, the boss had bothered him so much. So I'm getting ready to go back. He goes, no, don't go back. Don't go back. So I went and got the vacuum cleaner. I got a few other props. You call them props. Okay. Not Turon, Joe Tommaso. He used to say, you're Hollywooding the job. You got too many props. And a prop, you know what a prop is. It's like in the background, if you're a mad scientist, you got that Van de Graaff generator. Or the thing that the spark goes up. Oh, Jesus Christ. Well, anyway, you have these things in the background that make it look like you're really busy and everything. So I brought the vacuum cleaner over, and our boss was a dandy. He wanted everything clean. So when he came down and saw the vacuum cleaner out, he was happy. He's standing there. Well, yeah, we're working on it. And Joe made the whole thing really complicated. And then as he left, I said, how much does he know? And he goes, he don't know nothing. He says, he's your boss, but he bullshits his way through stuff. I go, oh, man. So we sat down there bullshitting. And little by little, we wired up so many of these slabs of Bakelite with the sockets and the transformers and put the tubes up to see that they lit. And that's all we had to do. We didn't even have to put up any voltage on the rectifier tubes with loads. You just had to do the filament. It was strictly a filament life test. I was like, you got to be kidding me. And we're back there, and it got hot because these tubes were like something big. Now, what the hell is that thing? Jacob's ladder. That thing I couldn't remember with the sparks. The spark goes up, and it gets real big at the top and stops. Then it starts at the bottom. That's a prop. Okay, Jacob's ladder. It's in there. The stuff's all in my head, but at 70 years old, I have those senior moments. And another thing I want to tell you, 50% of men are senile at 75, and I'm 70, so flip a coin. So anyway, I just wanted to tell you about Joe Turon. You've heard me mention him in various stories, and he was a character, but he wasn't a character in a bad way. A lot of the guys you work with, like the guy that said everything 3 times, where's mine? Where's mine? Where's mine? Every time you would come up with something from the machine shop or the tool room. Where's mine? And he'd hang over you like a you know what. He'd have to lean over you and hang on you. Okay, he was creepy, that guy. I would tell you his last name, but I don't want to be sued. But 3 times, 3 times, 3 times. Yeah, every time. And the boss would just like hate to even have to interface with him because of that. And his voice would get real high and squeaky whenever thought he was being pushed to do something he didn't want to do. But me and Turon, Joe would just, if you went up to Joe and told him he had to do a certain test, it was going to be done tomorrow. He wasn't going to get up out of his seat. He would recline in the seat. He was senior technician, and we were union, and I was the young guy. Oh, I used to call him Dad, and he called me Grasshopper. Back in the day when we worked together in 1975, Kung Fu was on ABC, and he called him Grasshopper. And the first days I worked with Joe, I kept calling him Pete instead of Joe, and he really hated that. He's the nicest guy in the world, but man, you'd find those things that would really annoy him, and you didn't you didn't overdo it because he would really get upset, okay? And he was too much of a nice guy to really push him too hard. But some of the stuff he would do. Oh, he had a he had a thermometer at the window, and every day he would look at the thermometer and then go over to the calendar and put the temperature down. Well, the guys would come from Alabama and clean the windows in RCA every few months. Well, they broke his thermometer, and then he'd go over to the thermometer and look at it and just sigh. So one day I come on real early. I bought him a new thermometer, a Taylor. I actually got one of them up on the wall here, a Taylor, but it's a plastic one. They used to make these wooden ones, and after a while, it was outside the window, and the moisture from condensation, the Taylors, the paint would start falling off them. But one of his things was he would look at the thermometer, and then he'd put that, and it was to make him realize that it was getting colder, so hunting season's coming, and then it's getting warmer, and it's getting ready to start the garden. So his whole life revolved around the garden and his children. Okay, and like I said, this is a stovepipe here, and in the main picture that I pulled down, you can actually it's got a bend in it, an elbow. I can't pull it up now because I'm recording. Let me make sure it's still working. Yeah, okay. So I just want to tell you, these people they did exist, and some of the stuff like that, putting the angle iron down his leg and limping days before, keeping his leg straight and then I doubled back one day and he's just like giggling, and then he showed me, he slide that thing down his pants and hook that to this latch, and then he'd walk out with me and going down the stairs. RCA had no elevator. Well, it did have an elevator on the other side. It was a freight elevator, but we didn't have elevators for people. And he'd go down that stairs, and he's like, and he knew how many pieces he needed to finish that tiller. And he will also tell you the story about somebody bought him. You know how these stories go around the internet? You could take a transformer and rewire it, and you can make a welder out of an arc welder. And somebody pushed him on that, and they got him the core, the wires. And when he got done, he says it didn't have enough amperage to really do real welding. He says it was bullshit. It was one of these back at a magazine. I can't think of the name of it. Lindsay schematics. Yeah, it was one of those things. And he says it didn't have any power at all. So his brother went and bought him a welder. Okay, and the wife she couldn't do nothing because the brother bought it for him. Then he went and bought his brother a new CB set. And I taught other people this story. I told other people this story, and they switched to the Turon method, because a lot of times they would want something. The wife says you can't have that, but the wife can buy whatever she wants. Or well, anyway, if you're married, you understand that. So the Turon method was you call the brother up and say, I want a welder. This is the one I want. And then the brother would buy the thing and bring it up, even though sometimes it might be Joe's money. Okay, he was a character, and he told me one time when him and his wife first got married, she was in charge of the paperwork, and he would come in the room and she had all the money out on a bed, and she had piles, and she was trying to pay the bills, and after that he took over the bills and stuff. But he was very frugal with his money, and that when he would stay store bought, he taught me about. He went over it real quick about making root beer. You buy the extract. It's a great hobby, by the way. If you get the bottles, see, we had this company called Brookdale, and they deliver soda bottles to you. And then there was a plastic rack that they went in, a crate, and I'd buy them and I'd clean them all up, or I'd buy them with the soda, and then after each soda was done, I'd rinse them out real good. I bought a corker capper, and I was making wine and root beer, and I gave the wine away as gifts, and the root beer I drank. But he's the one that put the idea in my head. You can make your own root beer. I make my own root beer. He made his own wine. Oh, he made his own beer too. I got into that for a little while. But this guy was just like a treasure trove of stuff, and he actually did it. And that's what made me more finish it than my father. Remember I told you my father got very lazy when he got older. This guy, he saved all his energy for 4 o'clock. And at work, you would never see him work hard unless Julie and Stacy were out sick. He'd take their tubes down. And trust me, two girls have a lot of tubes you got to take down. You got to take the readings before you take the 10 tubes down. They have to go in these styrofoam things. You got to double check them with the paperwork, and you got to take thousands of tubes down. And this guy could hustle, and he'd do that for like 5 days when those two were sick one time with the flu. I never seen a human being hustle like that. But then the next week he was back to his recliner chair, as we used to call it. I think that's it. All right, that's it.